They built a gate on his land without asking, so he turned it into a toll road and made them pay every time they passed. Jacob Myers lived a peaceful and quiet life on his ranch for more than 20 years. His land was wide and beautiful, stretching out with open fields, small hills, and a few dusty roads running through it. The ranch was not just his home, it was a place full of memories, hard work, and a calm kind of freedom. He raised cattle, grew some crops, and kept things simple. One narrow gravel road cut through a corner of his property, and although it technically belonged to him, Jacob never really paid much attention to it. Over time, some neighbors from a nearby community began using it to get to the main highway. It didn't bother him. They drove slowly, and it didn't disturb his animals or affect his daily work. As long as people were respectful, he didn't mind sharing a little. Things started to change when a new group of people moved into the neighborhood near the edge of his land. The quiet, friendly community was slowly turning into something more organized, and not in a good way. One of the new residents, a man named Rick Colton, seemed to be leading this change. He was sharp-dressed, always speaking in a firm voice, and always talking about rules, standards, and property value. Soon after, Jacob heard from another neighbor that an HOA Homeowners Association had been formed. At first, Jacob didn't think much of it. He wasn't part of the HOA. His ranch was completely separate from the housing development, so he assumed their rules wouldn't involve him. But then, one morning, everything changed. Jacob woke up early like he always did, had his coffee, pulled on his boots, and walked out to check on his animals. But something caught his eye. The far end of the field, right where the gravel road ran along the edge of his property, he saw a group of workers. They were hammering posts into the ground and rolling out long sections of metal fencing. At first, Jacob thought maybe they were fixing something or doing utility work. But as he got closer, he realized what they were building, a gate. It was a large, shiny iron gate, newly installed across the gravel road that ran through his land. On the gate was a bold sign that read, "Private Community Road Residents Only." Jacob stood there, shocked. That was his road, his land. No one had asked for permission, and he certainly hadn't agreed to this. He approached one of the workers and asked what they were doing. The worker shrugged and said, "We're putting up the HOA gate, sir. This road's being closed to the public. Only residents allowed now." Jacob's jaw clenched. "This isn't public. This is my road. This is my ranch. This land has been mine for over 2 decades. The worker looked a little nervous, but said, "We were told it was part of the community's easement. You'll have to speak with the HOA. Jacob didn't yell. He didn't lose his temper. But he turned around, walked straight to his truck, and drove back to the house. His hands were steady, but his mind was racing. He called the number listed on the HOA letter he'd received a few weeks back. He hadn't paid attention to it then. A woman answered and told him he'd need to speak to the president of the HOA, Rick Colton. He left a message, then another, then an email, no reply. Later that afternoon, Jacob went back to the gate. It was finished. Fully installed, locked, and already in use. He watched as a few cars from the housing development used their new key cards to pass through. Some of them even waved at him like nothing was wrong. His blood boiled. Determined to fix the situation, Jacob walked over to the gate with his tool set. He figured if they had installed something on his land without permission, he had every right to take it down. But just as he was about to start loosening the bolts, a car pulled up and 2 police officers stepped out. "Sir, step away from the gate." Jacob was stunned. "This is my land," he explained. "That gate's illegal. They put it up without my permission." One officer calmly told him, "We received a call about a disturbance. The HOA claims this is now a private road under their control. They've asked you to stop interfering." Jacob tried to explain again and again that it was his land. He offered to show his deed, but the officer said that if there was a legal dispute, it needed to go through the court, not handled with tools in the field. That night, Jacob sat at his kitchen table, staring at the old documents he had kept since buying the ranch. His land deed clearly marked the road. The boundary lines didn't lie. That gravel path was his, and he had let people use it out of kindness, not because it belonged to them. He couldn't believe what had just happened. An entire gate had been built on his land, blocking his own path, and the police had told him to back off. All because some group of people who lived in identical houses behind a fancy HOA logo thought they could take whatever they wanted. Jacob wasn't a man who liked trouble. But he wasn't weak either. He had built his life from the ground up. He had spent years maintaining his ranch with his own hands. No one had ever handed him anything, and no one had ever pushed him around. That night, he didn't sleep well. The sound of metal drilling and hammering echoed in his mind, and so did the officer's words. The HOA claims it's theirs. He knew he had to do something. Not just for himself, but to make sure people like Rick Colton didn't think they could step on the little guy and get away with it. He decided he would start with the paperwork, gather every legal document he had. Boundary lines, aerial photos, permit histories, whatever it took. The fight wasn't over. In fact, it had just begun. The next morning, Jacob made some calls. First, to a local lawyer he trusted. Then, to a friend who worked in the county's zoning and land use office. They agreed to help. Over the next few days, he began building a case. But deep down, he knew something else. He didn't just want the gate removed. He wanted to teach them a lesson they wouldn't forget. Because this wasn't just about a fence. This was about respect. And Jacob Myers wasn't about to let anyone, especially a smug HOA president with a fancy suit and a crooked plan, steal even an inch of his land. Not without a fight. Jacob Myers sat at his kitchen table, staring at the documents spread out in front of him. Land deeds, old maps, property tax records. He had gathered everything he could find that proved the road the HOA had fenced off belonged to him. Fence and gate weren't just annoying. They were a direct challenge to his rights. This land was his, and no one had the authority to take a piece of it away, especially not without asking. But now, people he had never even spoken to were deciding how he could use his own property. That didn't sit right with Jacob, not one bit. He had already talked to his lawyer, Mr. Harris, a sharp but calm man in his 60s who had been practicing in the county for decades. Mr. Harris looked over the papers Jacob had brought and nodded slowly. "You're right, Jacob," he said. "This road runs through your land, no question. And there's no public easement registered for it. The HOA is out of line." It gave Jacob a little relief, but it didn't solve the problem. The gate was still there. People were still driving on his land, now acting like they owned it. And Jacob had a feeling this HOA wouldn't give up easily. He wasn't dealing with neighbors trying to be friendly. He was dealing with an organized group that thought they were powerful and clearly didn't care about who they were pushing around. A few days later, Jacob met with his friend Sam, who worked at the county zoning office. Sam was able to get him access to satellite images taken over the past several years. Together, they looked at the same road over time. Images showed what Jacob already knew. The road had always been part of his ranch. In the older images, it was just a dusty trail used for cattle and equipment. Over time, as more homes were built nearby, some neighbors started using the road as a shortcut. Jacob had never stopped them. He believed in being decent. But now he was beginning to see how people take advantage of decency when they think it's weakness. One afternoon, Jacob decided to walk the entire length of the road. From the highway entrance to the gate the HOA had installed. It took him almost an hour, walking slowly, stopping now and then to take photos. He noticed more tire tracks than usual. Clearly, traffic from the housing community had increased. He also found trash along the edges of the road, fast food wrappers, plastic bottles, even a discarded coffee cup with a Homeowners Association sticker on it. That made his blood boil. Not only had they fenced off his land, but now they were using it like it was their personal driveway and leaving their garbage. Back at home, Jacob wrote everything down. Every detail, every change he had noticed, every complaint he'd received from his workers. The cows weren't grazing near the road anymore, likely scared off by the constant traffic. His own truck had to take a longer path just to avoid the gate. Even delivery trucks were confused and sometimes got stuck trying to turn around at the dead end that the HOA had created. Jacob's next step was to file an official complaint. His lawyer helped him send a legal notice to the HOA, demanding they remove the gate immediately. They attached all the proof maps, property boundaries, pictures, and records. The letter gave them 7 days to respond. 7 days came and went. No response. So Jacob drove to the HOA's office himself. It was a fancy little building near the front of the subdivision. The receptionist gave him a nervous smile when he walked in. "I'm here to see Rick Colton," Jacob said, voice firm. The receptionist looked uncomfortable. "He's not available. Right now, do you have an appointment?" "No," Jacob said, "but I have a message. Tell him Jacob Myers came by, and tell him the gate needs to come down." He left his business card on the desk and walked out. The next day, he received a letter, not a reply to his complaint, but a warning from the HOA. They accused Jacob of trespassing, property damage, and disrupting community peace. They warned him that if he continued interfering with the gate, they would file a lawsuit against him. Jacob almost laughed when he read it. The irony was thick. They were accusing him of trespassing on his own land. It was insulting, ridiculous, and frankly, it made him more determined than ever to fight back. He called Mr. Harris again. "Looks like they're threatening to sue," Jacob said. Mr. Harris didn't seem worried. "Let them try," he replied. "We've got enough evidence to turn this whole thing around on them." Jacob knew Mr. Harris was right, but he also knew legal battles took time. In the meantime, he had to live with that gate, had to deal with the noise, the trash, and the disrespect. He didn't want revenge. He wanted justice and, maybe, a little respect. One evening, he sat on his porch watching the sun set behind the hills. He could see the outline of the gate in the distance, blinking with the tiny red light from its automatic system. Cars passed through one by one, their headlights bouncing off the dusty road. That was when an idea hit him, simple but powerful. If they thought they could control his road, maybe it was time he started charging them for the privilege. It started as a joke in his head, something to make himself smile. But the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. If the HOA wanted to act like that road was theirs, they should pay to use it. Jacob didn't need to block them out. He just needed to turn the situation in his favor. He would make them pay for every car, every trip, every inch of land they crossed. The next morning, Jacob called Sam at the zoning office again. "Sam," he said, "I've got a crazy idea, but I need to know if it's legal." Sam listened quietly as Jacob explained. "What?" "A private toll road. A gate that Jacob himself would control. Cameras, a payment system, and a way to keep track of who used the road and when." To Jacob's surprise, Sam said, "It's not that crazy. If it's your land and the road is entirely on your property, you can apply for a private commercial use permit. It'll take some paperwork, but it's possible." Jacob's mind was racing. He could see it all clearly now. It had pushed him into a corner, but instead of pushing back, he would rise. He wouldn't fight them with anger. He would beat them with logic, law, and a bit of country cleverness. Over the next few days, Jacob started planning. He hired a contractor to help him install a small toll booth just past the gate. He bought a simple camera system and got help setting up a card reader. Designed a clear, bold sign that read, "Welcome to Myers Ranch Toll Road, $10 per vehicle. Monthly passes available." Even added a little humor to the bottom of the sign. "No HOA access without payment. All traffic recorded. Trespassers will be prosecuted." Before putting anything up, he filed all the necessary permits. Everything was done by the book. That was important to Jacob. He didn't want to become like the people he was dealing with. He wanted to stay fair, legal, and honest, but firm. When the booth was finally installed, Jacob stood by it and watched the first few cars approach. People were confused. One woman rolled down her window and asked what was going on. Jacob smiled politely and handed her a flyer. "This is a toll road now," he said. "You're driving on private land. You can pay the toll or take the public route around." The woman looked shocked. "You can't do that." Jacob pointed to the sign. "Already did." It didn't take long for the news to spread through the HOA. People were angry, confused, and demanding answers from their board. Some tried to argue. Some tried to ignore the toll booth entirely until they received legal notices in their mailbox warning them of trespass charges. Jacob wasn't trying to punish them. He was just making it clear. This land wasn't theirs. It never had been. And if they wanted to use it, they needed to respect it to him. He stood tall, calm, and proud. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't broken the law. He just turned the tables, $1 at a time, and this was only the beginning. Jacob Myers had always been the kind of man who handled his problems quietly and with calm thinking. He didn't believe in shouting or fighting unless there was no other way. But now, after everything the HOA had done blocking his road, fencing, part of his ranch, and threatening him legally, it was time to show them that he wasn't someone who could be pushed around. And he wouldn't just fight back with anger, he'd use their own rules against them. The idea of turning the gate into a toll road had started as a joke in his mind. Funny thought to make himself feel better. But once he realized it could actually work, he couldn't stop thinking about it. Why not? If they were treating his land like their own private shortcut, then why not make them pay for the convenience? And if they refused to respect his ownership, maybe they'd understand better when they saw it cost them money. Every time they ignored him, the first thing Jacob did was go to the county office and meet again with his friend Sam, the zoning officer. He explained everything in detail, from the gate to the HOA's behavior to the traffic that now disturbed his ranch. Sam listened patiently and then nodded slowly. If that road is fully on your land, and there's no public easement or right-of-way registered with the county, Sam said, then you're allowed to restrict, control, or even charge for access. You'd just need a private use permit. Not very common, but it's legal. Jacob felt hopeful, asked Sam to help him begin the paperwork. It wasn't a fast process, but Jacob had patience. While the application was being reviewed, he made other plans. He started sketching out a simple toll booth design. Nothing fancy, just a small wooden structure big enough to hold a scanner, camera, and signs. He didn't want to block people completely. He just wanted them to feel the weight of crossing his land. While waiting on approvals, Jacob spent a few days doing research. He learned about private toll roads, digital license plate readers, and simple payment systems. He visited nearby farms and talked to friends who had dealt with similar land disputes. Slowly, his plan was forming into something real. After a couple of weeks, the county gave him the green light. His application was approved. Jacob Myers now had full legal rights to run a privately managed access road on his land. That meant he could charge a fee, monitor traffic, and control who entered downtown. With the permit in hand, Jacob called a local contractor he trusted. They worked together to build the toll booth just a few feet past the illegal gate that the HOA had installed. This way, HOA members could enter their gate as usual, but before they could go any further, they had to stop at Jacob's toll booth. It was perfectly placed, perfectly timed. Next came the sign. It was simple, but bold. Jacob painted it himself and hung it next to the toll booth. It read, "Welcome to Myers Ranch Toll Road. Private property, $10 per vehicle per day. Monthly. Passes available. No HOA exceptions. All vehicles monitored by camera. Violators will be prosecuted." Jacob also created a flyer explaining the toll road rules. He printed dozens of copies and kept them ready. He wasn't looking for a fight. He just wanted people to know the truth. They weren't using a public road. They were crossing private land, and now they'd need permission or payment. The next day, Jacob stood by the toll booth, ready for the first drivers. He wore his regular ranch clothes, jeans, dusty boots, a flannel shirt, but he also had a calm, serious look on his face. He didn't smile much that morning. He was ready for what was coming. The first car approached slowly. It was a black SUV with an HOA parking sticker on the windshield. The driver, a woman in her late 40s, looked confused when she saw the booth. She rolled down her window and asked, "What is this?" Jacob handed her a flyer and pointed at the sign. "Private. Toll road, ma'am. This road crosses my land. It's not public, and there's a fee now." She looked stunned. "You can't be serious." "I am. The HOA built their gate on my land without permission. I've gotten the county permits. Everything is legal. I live just up the hill. I've been using this road for years. I've allowed it kindly for years. But the HOA took that kindness for weakness. Now, things are different." The woman huffed and drove off angrily, turning her car around. Jacob didn't stop her. He didn't raise his voice. He just watched her go and waited for the next vehicle. One by one, more cars came. Some drivers were confused, some were polite, some were angry. Few tried to drive around the booth, but Jacob had prepared for that. He had placed fencing and large rocks along the edge of the path to block off the sides. There was only one way forward through the booth by the end of the first day. Jacob had collected toll fees from 5 cars and handed out over 30 flyers. Not bad for a small rancher who'd been ignored and insulted only weeks earlier. But the real storm came the following day. Jacob received a letter from the HOA. It's written in the usual legal tone, accusing him of obstruction of community access, interference with HOA property, and harassment of residents. They demanded that he remove the toll booth within 48 hours. Jacob took the letter straight to his lawyer, Mr. Harris. After reading it, Mr. Harris chuckled softly. They're bluffing. They have no legal ground to stand on. Let them keep writing. Letters. Jacob didn't remove the toll booth. In fact, he upgraded it. He had a small solar-powered camera system to capture license plates and a contactless payment system for convenience. He also added a new feature: monthly toll passes. Residents could pay a flat fee each month and skip the daily toll. That option made a few people soften. Not everyone in the HOA supported what Rick Colton had done. Some residents just wanted peace and were willing to pay for easy access. A few homeowners even stopped by to talk with Jacob personally. One man, an older gentleman named Carl, apologized for what the HOA had done. "We weren't all part of that decision," Carl said. "Rick made a lot of choices on his own. I'm sorry you had to deal with this." Jacob nodded. "You're welcome to use the road, Carl. Just follow the rules." Over the next week, more homeowners began to show their frustration not at Jacob but at Rick and the HOA board. The toll booth was a daily reminder of how badly they had handled the situation. Every beep of the scanner, every dollar spent on a toll, was a little punishment for trusting the wrong people. Meanwhile, Rick Colton, the HOA president, refused to back down. He tried calling the county office, demanding they revoke Jacob's permits. But the office replied clearly, the land belonged to Jacob and the permits were valid. Rick then tried calling local news outlets to complain, hoping to make Jacob look bad. But the media wasn't interested. In fact, one newspaper wrote a short story about Jacob's toll booth, calling it a clever stand for land rights. Feeling cornered, Rick made one last move. He filed a lawsuit against Jacob. Jacob wasn't surprised. He saw it coming. Mr. Harris had already prepared for it. In return, they filed a countersuit, accusing the HOA of trespassing, illegal construction, harassment, and damages to Jacob's ranch. Both sides now prepared for court. But Jacob felt no fear. He wasn't a lawyer, but he had something stronger: truth, evidence, and the law on his side. He had maps, documents, camera footage, and even satellite images. He had neighbors willing to testify. He had time. He also had something Rick die: the dosh patience. The toll booth stayed up, the signs stayed clear, the cars kept coming. And Jacob kept collecting tolls, calm and steady. He had turned their gate a symbol of their power into his own weapon, not through violence, not through anger, but through cleverness, persistence, a quiet kind of justice. What had started as an insult had now become his advantage. And Jacob Myers was just getting started. Rick Colton was furious. He never expected Jacob Myers, a quiet old rancher, to fight back like this. The toll booth, the cameras, the big bold sign, everything had turned into a massive problem for the HOA. Rick had promised the residents easier access, more privacy, and higher property values. When he helped install that shiny iron gate across the gravel road, he said the gate would give their neighborhood more security and status. But now, instead of respect, the HOA was getting complaints, angry emails, shouting at meetings, even calls from homeowners demanding to know why they had to pay $10 every time they used the road. And worst of all, Rick could do nothing about it. The road, it turned out, wasn't theirs. It was Jacob's land, fully private, and the HOA had no legal right to touch it. That fact hit Rick like a brick wall, but instead of admitting his mistake, he kept pushing. He filed a lawsuit against Jacob, accusing him of unlawful obstruction of a shared community access point. But when Jacob's lawyer, Mr. Harris, responded with a countersuit, everything changed. Jacob wasn't trying to just defend himself anymore. He was taking the HOA to court for trespassing, illegal construction, property damage, and harassment. He had evidence, photos of the gate, satellite maps, county land records, video footage from his toll booth, even witnesses ready to testify. Rick had expected a tired old man to give up. Instead, he was facing a patient, well-prepared landowner who had turned the tables completely. The court date was set. Residents from the HOA, people who once supported Rick, started attending meetings not to support him but to demand answers. They were tired of the toll, tired of the conflict, tired of having to pay for someone else's mistake. Some people even admitted they had never agreed to the gate in the first place. Rick had pushed it through by twisting the rules and skipping the full vote process. Jacob, meanwhile, stayed quiet. He didn't argue in public, didn't go on the news. He simply prepared his case and waited for the day he could speak in front of a judge. When the hearing finally arrived, the courtroom was packed. On one side sat Jacob and his lawyer, calm and confident. On the other, Rick, surrounded by HOA board members. Looking tense and frustrated, the judge asked for opening statements. Mr. Harris stood and gave a clear explanation. Jacob owned the land. The HOA installed a gate on it without permission. Then, they falsely accused Jacob of trespassing on his own property. Jacob had every right to control his land and had followed all legal procedures to build a toll booth. The judge listened, carefully nodding. Then Rick's lawyer stood up, tried to paint Jacob as a difficult landowner who had blocked access for a whole neighborhood. He said the HOA had a historic usage right because the road had been used for years. But the judge interrupted, asking for proof of any legal easement or agreement. The lawyer couldn't provide one. That was the beginning of the end for Rick. Jacob's lawyer presented county maps, deed records, and zoning approvals. He showed photos taken over the years, proving the road was never public. Then he played video clips from the toll booth camera, cars passing through, Jacob calmly handing out flyers, and HOA members yelling at him without any reason. The most powerful moment came when Mr. Harris presented a video clip of Rick himself, walking, with the construction team pointing at the exact place where the gate would go. He was caught on camera saying, "No need to ask the rancher. This corner of land is barely used." The courtroom went silent. The judge asked Rick directly, "Did you get permission from Mr. Myers to build that gate?" Rick stammered, "Well, no, we thought. That's a yes or no question." No, that answer sealed it. The judge ruled clearly. The road was 100% private property. The HOA had no legal claim, and building the gate was a violation. Not only was the gate to be removed, but the HOA was ordered to pay damages to Jacob for trespassing, property disruption, and legal fees. The total came to more than $45,000. Gasps filled the room. Jacob didn't smile, just nodded once, quietly, as if to say, "I warned you, and you didn't listen." The HOA was also warned not to attempt any future construction or changes that touched Jacob's land without written permission. Violating that order would bring even heavier legal consequences. After the hearing, some of the homeowners came up to Jacob and apologized. One elderly woman even brought him cookies. "I'm sorry they did that to you," she said. "You didn't deserve any of it." Jacob thanked her politely. He didn't hold grudges, but he also didn't forget. Back at the ranch, workers came and removed the gate. The same road that had once been stolen from him was now fully his again. But Jacob didn't take down the toll booth. No, he left it standing only now. It was optional. He removed the strict toll fee and replaced it with a voluntary payment. It's a box and a waiver. The new sign read, "This is private property. Free access available only if you sign the waiver, acknowledging this road belongs to Myers Ranch. Otherwise, toll applies." Some people still paid. Others signed the waiver. A few, out of pride, still refused to use the road at all and took the longer public route around. Rick Colton. He was voted out as HOA president within 2 weeks. His reputation was destroyed. Many blamed him for the lawsuit, the money the HOA had to pay, and the embarrassment they suffered. He moved out a few months later, selling his house at a loss. No one came to say goodbye. Jacob didn't celebrate. He just went back to his quiet life. He continued caring for his cattle, fixing fences, and walking his land like always. But now, when he looked at that toll booth and the road beyond it, he didn't see trouble. He saw justice. He saw proof that one man, even alone, could stand. Up against a group that tried to take what wasn't theirs, he saw the strength of patience, law, and knowing your rights. And he saw peace not because he avoided the fight, but because he handled it with wisdom. Every now and then, someone would stop by the toll booth just to talk. Locals wanted to hear the story. They'd heard rumors about the rancher who turned a problem into a toll road and made the HOA pay. Jacob always told the story simply. No anger, no drama, just the facts. They built on my land without asking, he'd say. So I made them pay to leave. And people smiled. Because it wasn't just a story about land or tolls. It was a story about standing your ground and winning with grace. After the court's final decision, Jacob Myers felt something he hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. The noise was gone. The tension was gone. Most importantly, the gate that had blocked his land was finally gone too. The road was once again open. But now, it was open on his terms. It was no longer a free pass for people who had tried to take advantage of him. It was no longer a silent battle of rights. Now that stretch of gravel across his ranch stood as a quiet reminder that justice, even when delayed, still had the power to speak. The toll booth still stood where Jacob had built it. But it had changed. He didn't want to punish people forever. He wasn't doing any of this out of revenge. That was never his goal. So after winning the lawsuit and getting the HOA to pay damages, Jacob replaced the original toll system with a new setup. There was no more $10 per car rule. Now, there was a simple wooden box attached to the booth. The sign above it read, "Voluntary toll, pay what you feel is fair." Or sign the waiver to use this road for free. Respect the land. Respect the owner. It was a simple system. If someone wanted to use the road without paying, they just had to sign a short form that clearly stated they understood the road belonged to Jacob Myers, that they had no claim to it, and that they were using it with permission. Once signed, they could pass freely. No more barriers. No more scanners. Just honesty and understanding, and something surprising happened. People started showing respect. Cars still passed through. But most of the drivers stopped for a moment. Some dropped a few dollars in the box. Some signed the waiver and thanked Jacob personally. A few of the neighbors even came down to shake his hand and apologize for how things had turned out. They admitted that they never fully supported Rick Colton, the former HOA president. They had just followed along because they didn't know what else to do. One woman, Mrs. Taylor, who had lived in the subdivision for over 10 years, brought Jacob a basket of fruit from her garden. She said softly, "We let things go too far. I'm sorry for that." Jacob, always calm and humble, nodded. "It's over now. We move on." And that's exactly what happened. The HOA was now under new leadership, people who understood that good relationships mattered more than power. The new president, a retired school teacher named Mr. Elliott, invited Jacob to attend a community meeting, not to argue, but to talk. Openly, Jacob accepted. At the meeting, he explained everything. From the moment he saw workers building the gate on his land to the long court fight that followed, he didn't blame anyone. He didn't raise his voice. He just told the truth. The room was quiet as he spoke. People listened. And when he finished, the crowd clapped, not because he had won, but because he had stood his ground with dignity. Afterward, several residents asked him if they could make the road usage more official. They said they didn't want another mistake, like the last time. They offered to rent an easement from him, basically, a legal agreement that would let the neighborhood use the road in exchange for a monthly payment. Jacob thought about it carefully. He didn't need the money, but he understood the value of good neighbors. He agreed, but on his own terms. He said, I'll allow access under 3 conditions. 1. You maintain the road. If it gets muddy or damaged, you fix it. 2. You keep it clean. No trash, no noise. And 3. You never try to claim it again. You respect that it belongs to me. The HOA agreed to all 3 conditions, and the agreement was signed. From that day forward, the road was never a problem again. But something else began to happen. 2. Because of all the attention the story had gotten from newspapers, blogs, and even social media, people from nearby towns started stopping by to see the famous toll booth. Jacob didn't turn them away. In fact, he started offering fresh farm goods to visitors: eggs, honey, milk, and homemade jams. He built a small stand next to the booth and painted a sign: Myers Ranch Goods, honest work, honest prices. People loved it. The small farm stand became popular, and on weekends, locals came by just to buy fresh food and hear the story firsthand from the man who had turned a legal nightmare into something good. Some brought their kids, saying things like, "This is the man who stood up for what was right." Others just came for a friendly chat. Jacob, who had once been alone on his ranch, now had visitors every week. Not just curious strangers, but also neighbors who respected him. Didn't see him as the angry landowner anymore. They saw him as someone smart, patient, and fair. Even the younger people in the area started calling the toll booth the Justice Gate. It became a kind of symbol, not just of a legal win, but of something deeper. It was about standing up for your rights without losing your character. It was about showing that you don't need to yell to be heard. It was about proving that patience, truth, and law could beat arrogance and lies. Jacob never said much about the past. He didn't hold grudges. But when someone asked him how he stayed calm through all of it, he would smile and say, "I know what belongs to me. That's enough." Life on the ranch returned to normal, but better. The cows were back to grazing in peace. Delivery trucks used the proper entrance now. And Jacob himself had more company than he ever expected. On one particularly sunny afternoon, as he sat on his porch sipping tea, a young boy rode up on a bike and stopped near the booth. He looked around shyly, then came up to Jacob with a notebook. "In hand, Mr. Myers?" he asked. "Yes. My teacher told us to write about someone in our town who stood up for something." "My dad told me your story. Can I write about you?" Jacob chuckled and nodded. "Sure, son. Just write the truth." The boy grinned and pedaled away. Jacob looked out across his land, the same land that had once been taken for granted by others. Now every inch of it was his again, not just in legal papers, but in heart and respect. He had started out as one man against a big group, but he had ended with more than just a win. He had earned something far more valuable. He had earned the trust of a community, and in the middle of it all, the little booth still stood, quiet and firm like a monument to fairness, clever thinking, and quiet strength. It wasn't just a toll booth anymore. It was a reminder that respect must be earned, that land, once stolen, can be taken back, and that even the quietest people can have the loudest victories when they fight with truth on their side.